Hi, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, and I'm excited today to talk to Antwaun Thomas, who's a coach, a mentoring coach, and there are a lot of things about this subject that really interest me on a personal level. So welcome, Antwaun.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of coaches and personal development people about how to develop all kinds of things for kids, and as you go along and parent, there's so many different aspects of parenting where you're trying to develop them. And I think we both agree that sports is really can be really a key part of that development. It can be a crushing thing too. I mean, it doesn't always work out. We'll probably talk about that a little bit, but I want to hear your perspective, because it sounds like you've had some of the same maybe experiences that I've had with coaching and with kids, and how it works. But let's just start off with what interested you first of all about coaching.
Well, believe it or not, Paul, what interests me about coaching is because I got cut from the high school team every year when
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
growing up. I loved the sport, and a couple years after I got out of high school, I had an opportunity to get back involved with the game by coaching the youth league. They had more kids than they had coaches, and they asked if would be interested. I'm like, yeah, I would love to. And that 1 year, Paul, totally changed my perception of my love for the sport and why I love the sport. I realized not only did I love the sport, but I enjoyed teaching and coaching the sport more than I did playing the sport.
Hmm.
And 38 years later, I am still training kids, and I just finished my 11th year at the school and decided to focus more on my coaching and mentoring of kids. But it was that experience is what got me involved, and me getting cut was the best thing to ever happen.
And where are you teaching, and what sports do you coach?
I coach basketball, and I am in Salisbury, North Carolina, which is about 40 miles north of Charlotte.
Okay, yeah. So we talked a little bit about that, about the basketball. My experience with basketball, and one of the things that I was relating to you is I moved around a lot as a child and never learned how to play basketball, and so I missed out on all those pickup games, both as a kid and as an adult. And it was a really big thing that I missed in my life. Tried to get my son to do basketball. It didn't work out that well, and he ended up doing soccer. But I guess that leads to my first question: is when you are seeing kids, and especially the kids who don't totally, some of the kids rise to stardom immediately, and they're going to be great from age 4 or whatever. But when you've got a kid who's maybe, he's a backbencher, the coach puts him on every once in a while. How do you keep kids like that motivated in a sport that they're not good at, but maybe love like you did?
Well, I think the most important thing, Paul, is when you're introducing a kid to a new sport, it's all about how you introduce it. If you introduce it to them as a competitive sport, they're already going to start self-doubting themselves.
Mm.
But if you teach it, when you're teaching the skills and you're teaching step 1, step 2, step 3, allowing them to progress and be successful at every step and focus on the areas that they're not doing well and stay with that until they get it, their confidence grows and their interest in the sport grows. Then you start bringing in the team concept, but you really focus on that one-on-one. And also, you need to establish what makes them tick. Like you were describing, some kids are standoffish, and you got to figure out, hey, how do I get this kid to really be involved? And you make it fun. Sports is supposed to be fun, not the competitive part. We know it is there, but it must be fun first before it can be competitive.
Yeah, where were you when I was going to high school? I mean, you sound like a very enlightened coach, because most of the coaches that I had, sadly, I mean, this is 50 years 50 years ago, but they didn't have that type of attitude. They were mostly, there were a couple stars, and the rest of us were just, I don't know, hangers on, and we didn't get that personal experience. So maybe that's a good question also to have. And I've asked this before, is like, when you're in a school, you obviously don't have a choice of which basketball coach you have. Usually the school has one basketball coach. What do you do about finding, how do you find a coach or inspire a coach to have your kind of attitude and work with the kids rather than, beat the kids to higher performance?
I will tell you, Paul, and I tell a lot of kids this. I actually want to take one step back because something you mentioned really jumped out at me. So you were acknowledging my style of coaching. Well, I also train kids who have coaches who coach like you were talking about. They beat them over the head, do. And when I'm working with them, it's an opportunity to teach them what their coach's expectations are, but it also empowers them to go back to that coach and put the ownership back on that coach, which leads to the question you asked. When you're trying to make a team and you're trying to play for your school team, one of the best things you could ever do is empower your coach to coach you. And how you do that is you approach that coach and you're like, hey, I really want to be a part of the team. What do I need to do to contribute to the success of the team? Throw this term playing time out the window. Playing time is overused. Every player on the team wants playing time. Every
Yeah.
coach knows that. But when a player says, "Hey, coach, what do I how do I contribute to the success of the team?" Now that coach is responsible for not only telling you what you needed to contribute, but they now must coach you to be able to apply that skill that you're lacking to contribute to the success of the team.
I think that's a great idea. I don't know if a lot of kids maybe have the maturity to go up to an adult and have that type of thing. So I know you coach specifically, not only do you coach as a basketball coach within your school, but you also do one-on-one coaching of kids. Does that come up a lot about like, when you're talking to them, like what do it's in the non-sports part, but talking to an adult in a way that the kid feels comfortable doing, because at 14, that might be a little awkward.
Oh, 100%, Paul, and it is the foundation of how I coach, and most of the conversations we have are just that, conversations. The athletic components, I already know they come to the gym to get better. That's a given. So that's not the focus. The focus is making sure that they leave the gym more empowered than when they came in. So I ask those questions, like when I'm watching them, okay, well, do you get the opportunity to apply this skill or you get to do this? Because no, my coach won't let me. So why not? Because, well, guess what? If we keep working on the skill and you showcase this in practice and in games, now the coach can go, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Well, guess what? Now you're letting your coach know, hey, I've taken ownership of my own progress and success as a player. And this is what I try to instill confidence and self-esteem in kids. You take ownership of your success. Don't leave it in the hands of your coach, because most coaches, unfortunately, and I'm speaking from experience, and this is even in games, coaches only care about winning when their first and foremost job is to develop young players to become great people. That
Yeah.
is the job of a coach. And many coaches today do not do that. And Paul, if I may, I said I finished my 11th year. I chose to resign from that position because I felt as though I've done everything I can do at the school in the role as a coach and a mentor, because it's not all about winning and losing. I'm more about developing great young men and women. And if they happen to be good basketball players, great. But I want them to be better people, because when their basketball careers are over, they're gonna have to go into the real world. And I want that personality to shine and let them know, hey, I'm a hard worker, I'm determined, I'm motivated, and I'm inspired to be successful.
Wow, that's really a wonderful message. I hope that attitude is growing among the coaching community, because I mean, you're talking about building life skills. As we know, I mean, most kids who, even if they are the superstar in their basketball team, they are not going to they're not going to make it onto a college team. They're not going to go into the pros. They are learning skills for life rather than skills for a career in basketball. And what you're talking about is really, I think, really the essence of what gets you ahead in like the type of business career I had. If I had started day one and said, I'm not motivated to do whatever, I wouldn't have gotten very far. My attitude always was, when I was like, at least when I was starting out for the first couple of years, was, what can I do? I'd run and go get coffee. I'd run, make coffee, whatever it was I had to do. And I love that aspect where you say, like, coach, what do I need to do for the team, rather than what do I need myself to be the star? Because I think that's really at the essence of kind of where we are too as a culture. Do you think that, I mean, what do you think the parallels are about like teaching kids?
Oh, yes, sir. You hit the nail on the head there, Paul. That is the second reason I chose to step away from the competitive coaching. The game has shifted too much about the individual and not the team. And now the coaches are focusing on that star player. This kid's going to go play at this school. Years ago, when I first started coaching, high school coaches were all about, how can I help my player get to college? Now coaches are like, how can I get my star player to help me win a state championship? It's about me as a coach, and it's about the player as an individual. The team concept, I honestly believe, has gone by the wayside, and it's unfortunate, because these student athletes are the ones that are losing out, missing out. And statistically, the participation level at high school sports is dropping significantly in every sport, and primarily because kids are specializing in sports. Where, like we started conversation earlier, like with your son trying to get him involved in sports, it was for the love of sport. No one does things for the love of sport now. They do it for the love of success. And that is taking so much out of the youth sports in general. And for me, I had to ask myself the big question: am I still contributing to the success of the sport by coaching the way I do? Yes and no. For my team, yes, but as a sport collectively, I am not. And the example I can give you is the first 2 years of this school, this team won 6 games, lost 34 games. The next 9 years, we went to 7 consecutive championship games, won 5, had 3 undefeated seasons, all based on the concept I shared with you, how I coach. I empower players to be in control of their own success, and I empower them to question me as a coach, how they can be better
Mm.
contributors to the success of the team. And the players took ownership of the team. The last few years that I coached, it was the greatest thing just to sit back and watch them run their own team, because you knew my job had been done. They had taken ownership and the success was theirs, and I was a byproduct of their hard work.
Yeah, well, it's really an amazing story, and really inspiring to think that you could look at this whole subject area in a different way and more empowering way. What do you do with or how do you get kids started at an early age and develop the correct progression? Is there anything that's magical about that, where you start them early? I mean, is it key to find out where their passion is at age 5, or force them, not, I shouldn't say force them, but try to lead them into a passion? You always hear about people like hockey dads, especially. They get their kids in like at age 4, and they make sure their kids are born in what is the like latest in the year. So they start out the biggest kid, and they like excel from a very early age. And maybe I already know what your answer is going to be, but how does that work in terms of picking sports for your kids?
One of the things, Paul, I didn't mention is one of the other things I have a nonprofit youth coaching and mentoring organization, and it is a basketball coaching and mentoring organization, and it's a year-round program with along with the one-on-one, the group clinics. We also have summer camps, and our summer camps start as young as junior kindergarten and kindergarten,
Yeah.
and I call them like Coach T super starters. And what we do is we make every drill fun. It's not about nothing competitive. There are no games. And the kids absolutely love getting to dribble, trying to shoot the ball at a 10-foot goal when they can't. And believe it or not, last summer we had 3 kids in one day couldn't get the ball to the basket. They were kindergartners, could not get the ball to the basket. By day 3, they were making baskets consistently in 3 days. It's all about making it fun and challenging them in a fun way, not a win or lose. And yes, there are winners and losers in competitive games, but when you're training kids, it's not about winning and losing, success or failure, because every failure is another opportunity to be successful. So
Yeah.
that's our approach is there are no losers when we're training kids that young. It's all about win. And every year, kids keep coming back. Those junior kindergartners now are part of our 1st through 4th grade camp. And our 1st to 4th graders come back and become part of our 5th through 8th grade camp. The 5th through 8th graders stay and become part of our 9th through 12th grade camps. So that's where the progression is.
Yeah, and I know for you, building confidence is really important. And I'm sure that plays a big role. If you take the competitiveness out of it and it's just you yourself trying to achieve a little bit better, like, I mean, there are some sports that are really focused on that individual personal best, like track. But confident, how do you handle if you want your kid to develop the confidence that comes with sport, with getting better all the time, beating your own record, making whatever statistic better, but the coach is like slamming the confidence. It's all about how bad you were. And would you recommend in that case that you pull the kid out of the sport that they started because it's going to be detrimental long term, or figure out a way to counter that bad coach?
Oh, you've got to counter that, because I think one of the worst things you ever want to do is allow a kid an opportunity to step away from something early, because they're going to learn that, oh, if it doesn't go my way, I could step away from it. Well, when you get in the real world, you don't get to step away from that job because the boss says, hey, I'm going to need you to work this weekend to get that report done. You got to get that thing done. But at least I can give you a perfect example. This happened about 4 years ago. There was a young man that was part of, believe it or not, started out at our 1st to 4th grade. 4 years later, I'm coaching him on the school team. And throughout all of these lessons and clinics and camps, he never believed in himself. He always would turn and ask, Coach, did I do that right? Did I do that right? I'm like, you're doing fine. I'll let you know when you're not doing it fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. And you could tell he just lacked confidence. But as the years went on, he started getting more confident, but he still would ask and looking for that affirmation. Hey, am I? Well, fast forward to his 8th grade year. He was like the 2nd or 3rd player off the bench to play. And this is during the COVID year, by the way, actually, so this is 3 years ago. This is COVID year, and we actually got an opportunity to have a season where we're playing. We lose 2 starters. Our best shooter broke his arm, so he's out. Then we lost a player to quarantine. So now he is put into the starting lineup right at the tournament time, and we're the number 2 seed. We have to go play the number 1 team for the championship.
Uh-huh.
He waited till his 8th grade year to find his confidence. He hits a three-pointer to give us a three-point lead at halftime. He comes out to start his second half, hits another three-pointer, puts us up by 6 points.
Wow.
And then I won't go back when I go back and I've watched the game, I don't know how many times, and I cry every time I watch it 'cause I'm just so proud to watch these kids play hard. But he was everywhere, and I mean, he was hustling for balls, and not only did we win the championship, he was named to the all-tournament team. And after the all of our celebrations were over, he came up to me as we are getting ready to leave the gym to head back to Salisbury. He said, "Coach, I really want to thank you for having confidence in me and and sticking with me." And I said, "Well, young man, believe it or not, I've always had confidence and believe in you. You just didn't believe in yourself until today. So now you make sure that you take what you did today and utilize that in every aspect of your life, and success will always be at your fingertips." And now he's in high school, plays football, plays baseball, and he's not playing basketball because he's a great baseball player. That's really his main sport. But that's an opportunity to explain to you what happens when you stick with something and you have the right kind of support around you. And it wasn't just me, it was his teammates as well. They believed in him. They helped bring that confidence. I don't want you to think it's all me. It's
Yeah.
all about team,
But
and team must support
yeah,
team.
but you created that culture. I mean, it's a little like Ted Lasso, where you take a bunch of different players with big egos, you put them together, and all they're thinking about is themselves. And the magic really comes when they put all that together. And I mean, that's a huge lesson in business too, is a team of different people and more diverse perspectives and everything. You get a far stronger result. But I mean, I guess maybe you talked a little bit about creating that culture. But if you're the outside, if you're the dad looking in, is there anything a dad can do to help with that culture?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where it gets to where I empower kids, because in those trainings and those conversations, like I said, a lot of our training are conversations, and it's me learning what the dynamics are, what the relationship is like with parents without being personal, because kids typically will give you an idea where they are with their relationship with their parents. And it's all about dropping little nuggets and go, yeah, well, just let your dad know where you're working, what you're working on, and how I'm perceiving your success. Because if a parent values what a coach is providing your child, as long as that child is having that communication with parents, it makes all the difference in the world. And this, Paul, will probably lead to another great point I think is really important. When I'm coaching, I tell parents at the very beginning of the season, you are highly encouraged to cheer from the stands and cheer the team on. But the one thing I'd ask that you not do is coach from the stands.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, there are 4 things in play every sporting event, whether you're male, female, playing basketball, volleyball, football, baseball, whatever. There are 4 components that are in play in every competitive sport. Every player is trying to please themselves, their teammate, their coach, and their parents. And the one that's most important is they must please themselves first, and then their teammates and their coaches. Because if parents are supportive of their kids when they're playing, they should just be proud of the effort. Who cares if they win or lose? And so many kids they tell me this in some of the work. I said, yeah, after we go, my dad just tells me I should have had 20 points or I should have shot more. And like, well, guess what? The coach didn't want you to do that. The coach wanted you to do X, Y, Z. But if kids will have that conversation and share what their coach is sharing, now the parents have a better understanding of what the chemistry, what the concept, what the strategies are of the team. So now when they're watching a game, they're like, oh, yeah, this is what Johnny was telling me they were going to be doing, this continuity offense. So, hey, watch this. So it's an opportunity to educate parents about the sport.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a bunch of really good action points there for dads. Don't coach from the stands. I mean, a lot of people do that. I suppose a corollary to that is don't trash talk the other team while especially when you're talking to elementary school kids. You see that every once in a while where somebody's yelling at a second grader, what a bozo they are, which is horrible. But also to make sure that the kid understands that they should put themselves first in terms of their development. You said that the dad should understand what the coach's perspective is and what their strategy is, so they don't think that the coach is falling down if their son or daughter doesn't get to play. And then that may even involve, as a dad, going to meet the coach for a coffee or a hallway conversation and developing that communication so you a little bit understand what's going on. And then I think, which is a constant in fatherhood, is knowing your child and where they are so that communication is open. What would you recommend a dad say, like at the end of a game where the child maybe feels down because they didn't achieve what they wanted to, they let the team down, maybe all the appropriate emotions, and the dad can either say, yeah, you did suck, that wasn't a very good showing, or he could do the other thing, which maybe is just as harmful, which is, no, you were fantastic, you were the best, you're always great, which is, the kid knows that's a lie. So how would a dad ideally communicate in that situation to keep the confidence going, even though maybe the performance wasn't up to the standard the kid would have expected?
Well, yeah, it's all about keeping it real, and being honest, right? And I think it's the overview really of what this conversation is about. If they didn't win and the kid is really down, the dad's got to be honest because, hey, you guys played really hard. They were the better team today, but guess what? You get to play them again. You work a little harder, you have a better chance to beat them the next time. Been in those situations as a coach, been in this situation as a player, and this is a great opportunity. I'd love to the name of this podcast, Great Dads, because all the stuff we're talking about, Paul, one of the things I neglected to mention, and you didn't even know this about me, but I want to share it now because I think it's really important. My inspiration comes from my father, who served in the Marine Corps for 30 years, served tours of Vietnam, lost him to Agent Orange in 1996.
Yeah.
But he was not my biological father. He adopted my older brother and I when I was about 3 years old, and the life that he provided for us and all the things I'm talking to you about today is what he instilled in my brothers and I. And the other aspect that's really important is my wife and I were not able to have kids of our own, but by the lessons, values, and the love that my parents showed us is what I knew I had to pay forward. Because what my dad did for us, the sacrifice he made to take on two boys and raise them as his own. And the first thing he did was change our name to Thompson. And that's why my last name is Thompson. And it's something I'm proud of. And the nonprofit is named after him. JLT stands for my father, Joe Louis Thompson. So it's named in his honor. And the reason I point that out, fathers have a significant impact on their kids, and it could be positive or it could be negative. But you want it to be positive, and there's tough love that comes along with that. Absolutely. But back to this point about, how do you console your child after a tough loss? Be honest. Life is going to be tough. What are you going to do when you don't get that promotion? Are you just going to give up, change your career, or are you going to work harder so that promotion comes? You
Yeah.
lose that game, you work harder, you come back, and even if you don't win that second time, at least you're going to play harder because you know you didn't win the first time. It's an opportunity to instill encouragement. It's an opportunity to instill inspiration. It's an opportunity to instill empowerment with your kids. And your kids years later are going to appreciate that because they're going to say, wow, I didn't do that well, but dad was really supportive of me. And guess what else is going to happen? Your relationship with your father is going to be so much better. You're going to feel so much more comfortable going to him about anything because he knows at your lowest point, he was there for you to support you. And I think that this is again why sport is so important as an opportunity to build relationships for lifelong relationships with parents and other individuals.
Yeah, I'm thinking, well, maybe less about the relationship part, but I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago. I think it was Ken Gordon, who talked about this concept of victim versus victor and trying to instill that idea of looking for how you personally contribute to the situation, what you could do better, how you can surmount the problem versus, well, blaming it on the coach or blaming it on whatever the circumstances, and trying to instill that idea A corollary to that is something that I'm working on right now, is trying to help dads develop values within their family from an early age, determine what are their family values. And I don't mean that in a, in that political sense we hear about family values. I mean, in terms of developing what are the most important things that you're going to keep on reiterating to your kids when they are young, so that becomes part of hopefully who they are, like things like grit or resilience or integrity, honesty, those type of things, so that by the time they leave the house, they don't have to wonder whether they're an honest person. They just are an honest person because you've modeled it and you've talked about it. What is there a value that comes to mind that you think of, or several values that come to mind that are the most important in instilling in children?
There are 3 words, and it's a great segue into a book I wrote during the pandemic because our nonprofit was shut down, and I'm sitting here going, "Hey, I wanna still contribute to kids and be successful. What do I do?" So I'm like, "Hey, let me start writing this thing." What I didn't realize is these 3 words have been a part of my coaching for 38 years, and those values and those words are simplicity, effort, and attitude. And why they're so important, Paul, is every facet of a child's life, every facet of our lives either going to be simple or it's going to be complicated. Which one do you choose? If I choose to keep it simple, I'm going to probably be a little bit more focused. If I'm a little bit more focused, I'm going to do what the second word is, which is effort. I'm going to put forth more effort because now I've identified the simple approach. Now I'm put forth a little effort to lead to that success. But the most important to me is about your attitude. Because things are going to go great. We're talking about the games, losing games, winning games, losing championships, winning championships. And what are you going to do? What is your attitude going to be? Woe is me, victim versus victor, right? Back to your point. Well, your attitude impacts your effort and your simplicity. So, attitude to me is the most important thing. And even in losses, our last game, we lost by 27, 28 points, but I was about as positive as I could be. And the best example there was at the end of that game, the scorekeeper and the official came up to me after the game and said, "Coach, we absolutely love the way how positive you are with your team. You're losing and you're staying positive with your kids. You're not yelling at them. They already know that they're not doing well. They
Yeah.
already know they're losing. Why add to that? Because players will react under pressure the way their coach reacts under pressure. If you're calm, they're calm. And so I think that's a really important part. But those are the 3 important points to me that are important for every young person. And it's what I apply to everything we've talked about today.
Yep. So your book is SCA, like SCA of success. So simplicity, effort, and attitude of
Effort and
success.
just
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
success, and then it's the secondary title is The Ultimate Guide to Success for Preteens and Teens.
Right.
And it's great for parents, for students, and for educators because it
Yeah.
talks about a lot of things. And there's some stories in there as well, examples, one of the which I share with you about the young man that did well in the championship game. That story's in there as well as some others. But it's just a testament to, for me, to be able to share not only the impact I've had on kids, but the impact they've had on me as a coach that inspired me to continue to do the work that I'm doing. I don't do it for pats on the back. I could care less about that. But if I'm able to impact one child that turns around and does it for another, then I've done my job. And through our nonprofit and with the coaching and mentoring I'm doing, I see that's happening on a consistent basis.
Yeah. So I know part of what you do in your individual coaching, your mentoring too, is helping kids who are being bullied. And I started late as a kindergarten. I was only 4. So I suffered from being the smallest kid in the class. And then, like I said, we moved around. I went to 13 different schools over my time in the public school system, moving all the time, always the new kid, always the smallest kid, always the one who didn't know the rules to whatever the game it was. And so out of a fish out of water for every one of those sports things. So, and I was bullied quite a bit. What do you, I'm really fascinated by this subject because I remember at the time I was being bullied, and at first everybody was compassionate, but then there was a point where they said, well, you got to stick up to yourself and you got to go out and plan a fight with that person and show them who's boss and figure it out. And I was like, I'm just a child. Now you're asking me to be an aggressor and react in that way. It was like after they tried all the compassionate stuff, they decided that I should, pull out the big guns and go for that route. How do you handle that? That's probably a whole podcast in itself, but I'm really intrigued by the fact that you address this specifically. And given what you said, I can tell you're going to be a lot more compassionate about that, that young kid who doesn't have the tools to even know what's going on. He just knows he's being abused.
Yeah. So there's a word that comes up, Paul, when I talk about with a lot of kids and when it comes to adults and interacting with them. And that word is vulnerability. You
Mhm.
must be vulnerable with your kids because guess what? They're looking up to you. They're looking for you as guidance in every aspect of their lives when they're comfortable with. Of course, there are things they're not going to share with you. But just like you talked about you being bullied, you having a conversation with your son if he was being bullied, hey, sharing that story. Oh, it's not just me. Well, how did you deal with that? Well, guess what? Now that becomes a conversation. That conversation becomes strategy. That strategy becomes a result. That result empowers you even more as an individual. You're going to be willing to stand up for yourself even more. But if you just go, well, do the best you can, stand up for yourself, they don't know what that means. Because one child may think, "Let's go just go start wailing on whoever's bullying you." Well, that just gets you in trouble.
Right.
But you must be strategic in that and having conversations, in-depth conversations, letting your kids share as much and not go, "Why?" Why questions don't give you anything. You're gonna get a yes or no answer. It must be engaging questions because now you're letting your kids know you truly care about the situation that they're in. And it goes, well, how can we? Because the first thing kid does, they don't want you going to the school going, "Hey, my son's being bullied," because they know you probably went through that. You don't want anybody saying
Yeah,
anything.
it's like a prison. It's like what happens in prison. You go and snitch, then you're
Right,
even worse.
right. So you must, as a family, you must work together to come to a resolution. And guess what happens now when you start employing those strategies at school? Now your parents are going to support it because if it ever comes up against it, yeah, I know about this. As Paul and I talked about this, we had this conversation, and this is what we said would go. He's done exactly what we discussed, and we think it's the right thing to do. And now here we are, and I support Paul and what he's been doing. Now, what are you all gonna do about it? Because he's done nothing wrong. Now the onus is back on the school or teacher or whomever it may be involved. Now they have to do their part. And this is about exposing people. Words are words. It's all about action. And we must be actionable. And that's what you have to empower your kids to do is to take action. Simple resolution, a lot of effort, yeah, as a collective, and then keeping a positive attitude because we're gonna have a conversation, go to school. It's not gonna be over the next day just because we had a conversation. You gotta be willing to weather the storm and be resilient
Yeah.
and go through the highs and lows. And that's what attitude helps you through is the highs and the lows and keeps you focused on the end result.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of those things are really important is keeping that positive attitude while being realistic. I mean, again, being Pollyannish about it and just saying it's all fine is not going to work. And then being able to talk to your child, talk about strategies, talk about how you might be able to overcome this. I would use violence and reactive violence as the last. I don't. Not even a resort. It wouldn't be an option in my mind. But the more you can talk with your child about what they could do, join other clubs, meet other friends, reach out, be positive to other people. Don't present yourself as immediately vulnerable. I mean, I think those are all things that I would recommend. But it's still a huge problem in our schools. And I know most schools have anti-bullying programs, but from what my kids say, they are totally
Worthless.
adults do not see what happens on social media, what happens behind the scenes, what happens at the party. That we're talking about in that case more emotional bullying rather than physical bullying. Maybe they've controlled a little more of the physical bullying in the school. Maybe that's a good thing. But the bullying is still an issue, and you've got to be aware of it and ask your child if that's an issue. If you feel like they've changed in their personality from time to time, you need to get in there and ask what those questions are. You need to be close to them because it could be bullying, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it could be a lot of other different things too. But I appreciate your thoughts on the vulnerability as a parent and talking to them about it.
Yeah, oh, 100%. Well, this actually happened a few months ago. There's a young man that I work with that is a seventh grader, and he was being bullied by his teammates.
Ugh.
And great, I mean, just phenomenal kid. We actually played against his team this year, and he didn't get to play much, which really upset me as a coach. I was really looking forward to, competing against him. But the conversation, only reason we had the conversation, going back to why I say it's important to have a conversation with your parents, his mother reached out to me and asked me if I would call him, because this was going on and he wanted to talk to me, but he wanted his mom to. And she goes, "Would I call him?" I said, "No, I tell you what, you have him call me. Tell him that Coach T wants to talk to him." And 5 minutes later, he called me. We had the conversation and we talked about it. And I asked him, "So, how do you think you would like to resolve this?" And his answer was he wanted to quit. And I'm like, "Yeah, I knew you were going to say that." That's what you don't want to do. You have 2 weeks left. You've gone through this far of the season. Why would you let them win by you quitting 2 weeks with the season leading? And guess what else? You want to play next year. If you quit this year, it's just all going to start over next year. So, what do you say? We keep working forward. We keep pushing forward. When you go out there, you just play, do your thing. When they find out and you're just putting your head down and your attitude and your focus is where it needs to be, they're going to realize that what they're doing to you does no longer phase you. And now they're going to leave you alone and you're going to keep doing your thing. And he finished the season. He's coming about every other week for a private lesson. He comes for the open gym sessions, which we have for 8th through 12th grade boys and girls. And we play competitive games, but it's structured games. He's always the last one to leave the gym because he wants to just have a couple-minute conversation with me. He always embraces me and says, "Thank you, Coach T," and goes about his way. And the reason I share that with you, this is what parents can do with their kids. What I do as a coach, yes, it's a little different relationship, but the end results can be the same just by having conversations, sharing, allowing kids to speak their voice without you judging what they say and go, "No, don't do that," because they expect that. It's either going to be yes or no from mom or dad. But if mom and dad goes, "Okay, I understand," and I could see how that would bother you. But what do you think if we do X, Y, or Z. Now, that's what that conversation gets deeper and deeper. The child becomes a little more relaxed and really starts to open up their own mind and not just rely on you to give them answers.
Yeah. I think, well, I hearing a lot in there. I remember that. I remember that intense pain, and it's not. I wish it had been as easy as like working through it, but I think working through it is probably the only thing you can do, and helping the child also realize that a lot of these things don't last forever. I mean, things do get better, and I know that's a big saying within the gay community is that things do get better,
Better.
but the same way bullying. Sometimes the people who bullied you one year are the people who are your next friend, your best friends the next year, and a lot of that does not, it doesn't continue on and on. But it's a rough situation for kids that age. Well, I really have enjoyed this conversation. You've taught me a lot because I'm like I said, I was not a sporty kid. So a lot of this, I can just imagine the situation. I know I've been involved enough sports with myself and with my son and daughter to know good coaches and bad coaches. And I can tell I really wish they'd been coached by you in all their sports throughout the entire time. So Antwaun Thompson, great to have you. You have a website at Coach T's Corner. You go by T for Thompson. So Antwaun Thompson, and CoachT'sCorner.com is where you can find you. And I imagine your mentoring and coaching services for one-on-one. Is that just in North Carolina, or you'll do things by Zoom across the country?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I actually have one of the other things I just started an online academy, which is I'm actually converting my book into an online academy in courses on each one of those. And they're being developed in 3 formats. So, children learn in different ways. So it's a video version, ebook version, and audio versions of courses. And it covers responsibility, accountability, leadership, time management, confidence building, communication, all those good things.
All those key skills. And you also have the book, let's not forget the SEAC of Success, which you could find, I imagine, on Amazon.
Amazon. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Antwaun, nice to meet you. And thank you for making the time to talk with us. Very inspiring words and filled in a lot of gaps in my knowledge.
Well, Paul, listen, I really want to extend a huge thank you to you. And just an opportunity to talk about something that's really important. I think our next generation of leaders is so important and they're going through a tough time. And I appreciate you having this podcast and talking about the important topics that are going to be beneficial for them. So I wish you continued success as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Antwaun. All right. Paul Banis with GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching services at GreatDad.com/coaching. And also my course on how to develop gratitude as a way toward better well-being and happiness at GreatDad.com/gratitude. And it's 50% off for podcast listeners with the code podcast50. So until next time, take care.